The first shot came without warning, shattering the evening calm of Laramie Creek as Nathan Cole dove for cover behind a weathered wagon wheel. It was 1878, and the Wyoming Territory was still untamed, its vast plains and jagged mountains a constant reminder that civilization was merely a veneer over wild country. "Barton!" Nathan shouted, his voice carrying across the dusty street. "This ain't how decent men settle scores!" Another bullet splintered wood inches from his head, and Nathan cursed under his breath. 3 days in town, and already he'd managed to anger the local cattle baron's son, a man with more money than sense, and a quick trigger finger to boot. "You insulted my honor, Cole!" The voice was slurred with whiskey and privilege. "Nobody talks to a Barton that way." Nathan hadn't meant to cause trouble. He'd come to Laramie Creek with a purpose, carrying a promise heavier than the Colt revolver on his hip. But when young Barton had been rough handling an elderly shopkeeper, Nathan's sense of justice wouldn't let him stand aside. The shooting stopped abruptly as the town marshal appeared, shotgun in hand. "That's enough, Barton! Go sleep it off before I wire your father!" Nathan peered around the wagon wheel, watching as Barton staggered away, muttering threats. The marshal approached, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "You picked the wrong fella to cross," he said, eyeing Nathan. "You're new around here. What brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" Nathan stood, dusting off his worn denim pants. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the setting sun, his face weathered from years on the trail. "Looking for someone. Name's Lockhart. Richard Lockhart." The marshal's expression changed. "Old Rich? You're about 6 months too late, son. Consumption took him last winter." Nathan felt his stomach sink. The dying man's words echoed in his mind. "Find my daughter in Laramie Creek. Tell her." He'd promised, and Nathan Cole was a man of his word. "His daughter still around?" Nathan asked, adjusting his hat. "Lydia? Sure is. Runs the Lockhart place about 5 miles east of town. Struggling something fierce, I hear." Rich wasn't much for planning ahead. Nathan nodded grimly. "I need to speak with her. I've got a debt to settle." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "Word of advice, stranger. Lydia Lockhart's had more than her share of drifters claiming her father owed them something. She's got a shotgun and knows how to use it. It's not that kind of debt," Nathan replied softly. "I owe him." Dawn was breaking over the eastern hills when Nathan rode up to the Lockhart ranch. It was smaller than he'd expected, a modest cabin with a barn in need of repair, a corral holding a few horses, and fields that hadn't seen proper tending in some time. A lone figure was hauling water from a well, the silhouette unmistakably feminine despite the practical men's clothing. As he approached, she set down the bucket and reached for something leaning against the well. The shotgun was pointed at his chest before he could even dismount. "That's far enough, stranger," she called. Her voice was clear and strong, with none of the quaver of fear he might have expected. Nathan raised his hands slowly. "Miss Lockhart? Lydia Lockhart? Who's asking?" Her face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but he could see sharp, intelligent eyes assessing him. "Name's Nathan Cole. I knew your father." The shotgun didn't waver. "Everyone claims they knew my father. Usually right before they tell me he owed them money." Nathan shook his head. "It's the other way around, madam. I owed him. I've come to repay that debt." There was a long pause as she studied him. Finally, she lowered the shotgun slightly. "Get down. Slow. Keep your hands where I can see them." Nathan complied, tying his horse to the hitching post. Now that he was closer, he could see her clearly. Lydia Lockhart was perhaps 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her face was sun-kissed and striking, with her father's determined jaw and eyes that seemed to cut right through pretense. "How did you know my father?" she asked, keeping a cautious distance. "Battle of Stones River, Tennessee, 1862. I was a green recruit, scared out of my wits. Your father was a sergeant in my company." Nathan removed his hat respectfully. A Confederate sharpshooter had me in his sights. Your father pushed me down and took the bullet meant for me. Lydia's expression softened slightly, but suspicion remained. He never spoke much about the war. Most men don't, Nathan replied. He was wounded badly. I carried him back to our lines. Doc said he wouldn't make it through the night, but your father was stubborn. That he was, she agreed, a hint of a smile touching her lips. Before the fever took him, he made me promise something. Said if I survived, I'd find him someday and help his family when they needed it. Nathan looked around at the ranch. From what I can see, that time might be now. Lydia's chin lifted proudly. We're managing just fine. With all due respect, madam, this place needs work. Fences are down, fields need plowing. He hesitated. I'm offering my services. No charity, just repaying what I owe. And how long would this arrangement last? Until you decide the debt is paid and move on? There was bitterness in her voice. Until the spring planting is done, at least. That gives you 3 months to get back on your feet. Nathan met her gaze directly. I'm a man of my word, Miss Lockhart. I promise your father. Lydia studied him for another long moment, then nodded curtly. There's a cot in the barn. First sign of trouble, and I'll have you off my property faster than you can blink. Fair enough, Nathan said, picking up his saddlebags. I'll start on that north fence today. Have you eaten? She asked abruptly. Not since yesterday. She sighed. Come in for breakfast first. Can't have you fainting in my fields. The cabin was small but clean, with simple furnishings and a few treasured items: a porcelain figurine, a framed tintype of what must have been her parents on their wedding day. A younger girl of perhaps 16 looked up from the stove, her resemblance to Lydia unmistakable. Lucy, this is Mr. Cole. He'll be helping around the ranch for a while. Lydia hung her hat on a peg. Mr. Cole, my sister Lucy. The girl smiled shyly. Pleased to meet you, sir. Nathan, please, he replied, setting his hat on his knee as he took a seat at the rough-hewn table. Smells good. Just bacon and biscuits, Lucy said, serving him a plate. And coffee, if you don't mind it strong. Strong as you've got it, Nathan assured her. He noticed Lydia watching him carefully, like he was a strange animal that had wandered into her home. Where've you been all these years? She asked abruptly. The war's been over more than a decade. Nathan sipped his coffee before answering. All over. Texas cattle drives. Mining in Colorado. Tried my hand at trapping up in Montana territory. None of it stuck. And you just happen to remember your promise now? Her tone was skeptical. Nathan set down his cup. I've been looking for your father on and off for years. Trail went cold until last autumn when I met a trader who mentioned a Richard Lockhart in Wyoming territory. He looked her in the eye. I came as soon as I could. Something in his steady gaze must have convinced her, because she nodded once and turned her attention to her own breakfast. The work was backbreaking, but Nathan found a strange satisfaction in it. The Lockhart ranch had good bones, rich soil, a reliable creek, and enough grazing land for a modest herd. It had simply suffered from neglect after Richard fell ill. In that first week, Nathan repaired the north fence line, mucked out the barn, and began clearing an overgrown field. He worked from sunrise to sunset, taking only brief breaks for meals. Lydia watched him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. On the 8th day, as he was repairing a leak in the barn roof, he heard shouting from the direction of the house. He scrambled down the ladder and ran toward the commotion, hand instinctively dropping to his holster. 3 men on horseback had ridden into the yard. Their leader, a portly man with a florid face, was gesturing emphatically at Lydia, who stood on the porch with arms crossed. Final notice, Miss Lockhart, the man was saying. Mr. Barton's been more than patient. Your employer knows my situation, Mr. Dawes, Lydia replied, her voice steady despite the color in her cheeks. I'll have his money by the end of the season. Dawes laughed unpleasantly. That's what you said last season. Mr. Barton's offering you a fair price for the property. More than fair, considering. Nathan approached slowly, making sure they saw him. Problem here? The men turned, and Dawes' eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. Mr. Cole works for me, Lydia said firmly. And this is private property. Nathan positioned himself beside Lydia on the porch. The lady asked you to leave? One of the other riders, a younger man with a familiar face, leaned forward. You're the fella from town. The one who stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Nathan recognized him as the drunk from his first day in Laramie Creek, Barton's son. Junior here's been helping his pa expand their holdings, Dawes explained with a smirk. Lockhart Place is the last piece they need to control the water rights in this valley. We're not selling, Lydia insisted. Now get off my land. Junior Barton spat on the ground. You've got debts, woman. Pa holds the note from the bank. One way or another, this place will be ours by summer. Nathan stepped forward. I suggest you deliver that final notice another day. The lady's made herself clear. Dawes glared but motioned to his companions. We'll be back, Miss Lockhart. Mr. Barton isn't a patient man. As they rode away, Nathan turned to Lydia. Bank loans? She sighed, shoulders slumping once the men were out of sight. Pa borrowed to expand before he got sick. Couldn't keep up the payments while caring for him. Barton bought the note from the bank. She looked up at him, vulnerability showing through her tough exterior. We have until July to pay it off. How much? $500. Nathan whistled softly. It was a substantial sum. The cattle? 12 head. Not enough to cover it, even if I sold them all. She rubbed her temples. I've been taking in mending from town, and Lucy gives piano lessons to the banker's children. It's not enough. What about the fields? Nathan asked. Good harvest could bring in cash. If we had seed money. If we had help. She laughed bitterly. If. Nathan was quiet for a moment. I've got about 200 saved. It's a start. Lydia stared at him in shock. I can't take your money. It's not charity. It's an investment. Nathan leaned against the porch railing. Partners. We get this place producing again, sell the harvest, pay off Barton, and split whatever's left. Why would you do that? Suspicion crept back into her voice. I told you. I owe your father. Lydia studied him for a long moment. This debt must be mighty important to you. Nathan looked out across the land, remembering a blood-soaked battlefield and a sergeant's final request. Some debts define a man, Miss Lockhart. This is one of them. That night, after Lucy had gone to bed, Lydia found Nathan on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette and staring at the stars. I've been thinking about your offer, she said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the spring chill. And I accept. Partners. She sat beside him on the step. But I want everything in writing. Nathan chuckled. Smart woman. I've had to be. She was quiet for a moment. Tell me about him. My father, during the war. He never spoke of it. Nathan tapped ash from his cigarette. He was respected. Not just by officers, but by the men. That's rarer than you might think. He smiled at a memory. Had a way of knowing exactly when to be tough and when to show mercy. That sounds like him, Lydia said softly. Night before Stone's River, we all knew a big fight was coming. Some of the boys were writing letters home, others praying. Your father went from man to man, sharing his coffee, listening to their fears. Nathan's voice grew distant. He told me he had 2 little girls waiting at home, and that's what kept him going, the thought of seeing them grow up. Lydia blinked rapidly, turning away to hide the tears that threatened. He missed so much. Lucy's graduation. My broken engagement. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Engagement? She laughed without humor. Local boy. Changed his mind when Pa got sick and the money started running out. She looked at him directly. That's why I'm cautious about your help, Mr. Cole. People's generosity tends to have conditions. Nathan, he corrected gently. And the only condition is that we work together to save this place. After that, I'll be on my way, debt paid. Lydia nodded, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Nathan worked the fields and fences, while Lydia tended the cattle and garden. Lucy kept the house and continued her piano lessons in town. Slowly, the ranch began to show signs of recovery. Nathan found himself watching Lydia when she wasn't looking. The graceful way she moved, the determination in her jawline, the rare smile that transformed her face when something amused her. He told himself it was admiration for her resilience, nothing more. One afternoon, as Nathan was returning from town with supplies, he spotted a plume of smoke rising from the direction of the north pasture. He urged his horse into a gallop, heart pounding. Fire was every rancher's nightmare. He found Lydia already there, beating at the flames with a wet blanket. A section of grass was burning, dangerously close to the newly repaired fence and the dry timber beyond. "Get the shovel from my saddlebag!" he shouted, jumping down to help her. Together they fought the fire, digging a trench to contain it, beating out flames that leapt toward the valuable timber. It was exhausting, dirty work, and by the time they had it under control, both were soot-stained and coughing. "How did it start?" Nathan asked, collapsing onto the ground beside her. Lydia wiped her forehead, leaving a streak of ash. "Not natural. Found this." She held up an empty whiskey bottle with a rag stuffed in the neck. "Someone threw it over the fence line." Nathan took it, examining the charred rag. "Barton? Who else?" She looked at the blackened grass, her expression grim. "They're getting desperate. Trying to scare us off." "It won't work," Nathan said firmly. Lydia turned to him, her face suddenly vulnerable. "Why are you really here, Nathan? A promise to a dying man, is that truly enough to make you invest everything in strangers?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "Your father didn't just save my life. He gave me purpose when I had none." He looked at his hands, calloused from weeks of ranch work. "I was a lost boy when I joined up. Running from a father who used his fists more than his words. Your father saw something in me worth saving. What did he say to you? At the end?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He made me promise that if I lived, I'd make something of myself. That I'd be the kind of man who kept his word and helped others." Nathan met her gaze. "And he made me swear that if his family ever needed help, I'd be there." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "That sounds like him." Without thinking, Nathan reached out and brushed a smudge of soot from her cheek. The touch lingered, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Lydia drew back first, standing abruptly. "We should get back. Lucy will be worried." Nathan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That night, as a spring storm rattled the windows of the cabin, Nathan lay awake in the barn, listening to the rain on the roof and thinking of the look in Lydia's eyes when he touched her face. Something was changing between them, something neither had anticipated. The next morning, Nathan rode into town to speak with the marshal about the fire. The lawman listened but shook his head. "Without proof, there's nothing I can do. Barton's the biggest man in the county. His son could burn down half the territory, and folks would look the other way. So they just get away with it?" Nathan demanded. The marshal sighed. "Look, Cole, I understand your frustration. But you're not thinking clearly. Barton doesn't just want the Lockhart place. He wants it cheap. Scaring you off is one tactic. Getting you to lose your temper, maybe draw on his boy, that's another. Either way, the sisters lose the ranch." Nathan knew the marshal was right. A direct confrontation would only make things worse. As he was leaving the marshal's office, a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see Dawes, Barton's foreman, approaching with a smug smile. "Mr. Barton would like a word, Cole. Private-like." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "Lead the way." Barton's office was in the back of the largest building in town, a combination general store and bank that the cattle baron owned outright. The man himself sat behind a massive desk, his bulk straining the seams of an expensive suit. Junior lounged in a corner, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. "Cole," Barton acknowledged. "I hear you've taken quite an interest in the Lockhart property." "I'm helping a friend," Nathan replied evenly. Barton chuckled. "Friend, is it? Heard different. Heard you're sweating away your days for a woman who won't give you the time of day." Nathan kept his expression neutral. "Did you have a point to make, Mr. Barton?" "Direct." "I like that." Barton leaned forward. "Here's my offer. I'll pay you $300 to walk away. Today. Leave the territory and don't look back." "Not interested." Junior snorted. "Told you, Pa. He's sweet on the older one." Barton studied Nathan. $500 then. More than enough to start fresh somewhere else. California, maybe? I hear there's opportunity out west. Nathan stood. "The Lockhart sisters aren't selling. Neither am I." "You're making a mistake, son." Barton's voice hardened. "That land will be mine, one way or another." "Is that a threat?" "Just a fact of business." Barton smiled coldly. "I always get what I want." "Always." Nathan left without another word, the encounter leaving a sour taste in his mouth. He knew Barton's type, men who confused wealth with worth, who believed everything and everyone had a price. When he returned to the ranch, he found Lydia in the garden, her hands deep in the soil as she planted the vegetable seedlings they'd started weeks before. The sight of her hair escaping its braid, cheeks flushed with exertion, made something twist in his chest. "How'd it go with the marshal?" she asked, sitting back on her heels. Nathan shrugged. "About as expected. No proof, no action." "Figured as much." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Something else is bothering you." He hesitated, then told her about Barton's offer. Lydia's face paled. $500. That would pay off the loan. It would put money in my pocket and leave you defenseless," Nathan corrected. "I declined." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "Most men would have taken it." "I'm not most men." The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. Lydia stood slowly. "No," she said softly. "You're not." Their eyes met, and this time neither looked away. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings and growing awareness. Lucy's voice broke the spell. "Lydia! Nathan! Supper's ready!" Lydia cleared her throat. "We should go in." "Lydia," Nathan said, catching her arm gently. "I meant what I said. I'm not leaving until this place is secure." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back to his face. "And then?" The question hung in the air, laden with meaning. "That depends," he said carefully, "on whether there's a reason for me to stay." Spring gave way to early summer, and the ranch flourished under their combined efforts. The fields were planted, the cattle fattening on sweet grass, and the garden producing more than the three of them could eat. Lydia began selling excess vegetables and eggs in town, adding to their growing fund for the bank payment. But as their prospects improved, Barton's harassment intensified. Fence posts were pulled up in the night. A yearling calf disappeared, likely rustled. Anonymous letters arrived, threatening everything from arson to violence. Through it all, Nathan and Lydia grew closer. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings, they often sat on the porch, talking long after Lucy had gone to bed. Nathan shared stories of his travels, while Lydia spoke of her dreams for the ranch and her fears for the future. One evening in late June, a violent thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains. Nathan was checking the barn when he heard Lydia calling his name. He ran through the downpour to find her struggling to close a shuttered window that had blown open, rain soaking the interior of the cabin. Together they forced it shut, laughing at their sudden drenching. When they turned to face each other, the laughter died. Lydia's wet clothing clung to her figure, and raindrops glistened on her skin. Nathan was acutely aware of her nearness, of the sound of her breathing. "Where's Lucy?" he asked, his voice rough. "In town. Staying with her friend Sarah because of the storm." Lydia didn't move away. "She won't be back until morning." Nathan swallowed hard. "I should go." "Stay," she whispered. "Please." He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw. When she didn't, he brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his fingers trailing along her cheek. Lydia's eyes fluttered closed at the touch. "I've been fighting this," she admitted. "Telling myself it's foolish." "Is it?" Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. "Probably." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a directness that took his breath away. "But I don't want to fight it anymore." Nathan bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened with months of suppressed longing. Lydia's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer as the storm raged outside. Later, as they lay together in her narrow bed, the rain a steady drumbeat on the roof, Lydia traced the scar on his shoulder, a souvenir from the war. "What happens when July comes?" she asked. "When the debt is due?" Nathan pulled her closer. "We'll have enough. Between the cattle we can sell now and what I've saved, we're close." "And after that? When your promise is fulfilled?" There was vulnerability in her question. Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "Lydia Lockhart, I came here because of a promise to your father. But I'm staying because of you." He touched her face gently. "If you'll have me." Her answer was in the way she pulled him down for another kiss, in the tears that slipped silently down her cheeks, in the whispered yes against his lips. The confrontation, when it came, wasn't what any of them expected. 3 days before the loan payment was due, Nathan rode into town with Lydia to deposit their savings at the bank. They now had $480, just 20 short of what they needed. Nathan was confident they could negotiate the small difference. As they approached the bank, they saw a crowd gathered outside. The marshal spotted them and hurried over. "You'll want to hear this," he said, leading them through the throng. On the bank steps stood Junior Barton, his face bruised and eyes wild. Beside him, the town preacher looked grim. "He came in at dawn, confessing everything," the marshal explained in a low voice. "Seems guilt finally caught up with him." Junior was addressing the crowd. "It was Pa's idea, burning them out. Said it would look like an accident." His voice shook. "But when that didn't work, he wanted more. Told me to put the fear of God into them." He looked directly at Nathan and Lydia. "I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to die." Lydia's hand clutched Nathan's arm. "What is he talking about?" The preacher stepped forward. "Gilbert Barton passed away early this morning. Heart failure, the doctor says. But before he went, his son confronted him about their actions against your property. The shock appears to have been too much." A murmur ran through the crowd. The marshal added quietly, "Junior's been talking non-stop. About the fire, the threats, everything. Even about buying your banknote to force you out." Nathan felt Lydia stiffen beside him. "Where does that leave us?" she asked. "The loan is still due." The bank manager pushed through the crowd, a portly man with wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Lockhart, in light of these revelations, the bank is prepared to renegotiate your father's loan. A longer term, more favorable interest." Relief flooded through Nathan. "You'll accept what we have now as payment?" "With a new agreement for the balance, yes." The banker nodded. "It seems only fair, given the circumstances." As word spread through the crowd, several townspeople approached, offering work or produce orders. The blacksmith promised to repair their plow at no charge. The general store owner mentioned needing regular egg deliveries. "Seems Barton's grip on this town wasn't as tight as he thought," Nathan observed. Lydia squeezed his hand. "Or people just needed to see someone stand up to him." That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, Lydia was unusually quiet. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, making the modest Lockhart property look like something from a painting. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked. Lydia smiled softly. "That my father would be proud. Of the ranch. Of Lucy and me." She looked at him. "Of the man who kept his promise." "I think he'd be prouder of his daughters," Nathan replied. "You held on when most would have given up." They crested the final hill, the cabin coming into view. Lucy stood on the porch, waving excitedly as they approached. Nathan felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "that field beyond the creek would be perfect for building." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Building what?" "A house. Something bigger than the cabin. Room to grow." He glanced at her. "If that's something you might want." Her smile was answer enough. 1 year later, Nathan stood on the porch of the new house, watching as guests arrived for the harvest festival. The Lockhart Ranch, now the Lockhart Coal Ranch, had become one of the most productive in the county. The loan was paid in full, and they'd even hired 2 hands to help with the expanded cattle operation. Lydia emerged from the house, beautiful in a blue dress she'd sewn herself. Her stomach showed the slight roundness of early pregnancy, a secret they'd only shared with Lucy so far. "Nervous?" Nathan asked, taking her hand. She laughed. "About a little party? After everything we've been through?" He pulled her close, marveling at how this strong, remarkable woman had become his wife. "Your father would be proud," he whispered against her hair. "He sent you to me," Lydia replied softly. "I think he knew what would happen. A dying man's request changed my life," Nathan acknowledged. "Brought me home when I didn't even know I was looking for one." Lucy called from inside, announcing the arrival of more guests. Nathan and Lydia shared one more private smile before turning to welcome their neighbors, no longer as strangers fighting to survive, but as a family with deep roots in the land and each other. The debt was paid. But the love that had grown in its place would endure far longer than any promise.